Have you ever wondered what it's really like to live alone as you grow older? At first, I thought it would be all about freedom, finally having the chance to do things my way, on my schedule. But what about the hidden truths no one talks about? There are also challenges I never saw coming. From learning how to handle emergencies on my own to finding ways to stay connected and avoid loneliness, I've discovered that living alone is a mix of unexpected struggles and small, beautiful victories. In this video, I'll share my experiences and practical advice to help you navigate this unique chapter of life with confidence and joy. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more helpful tips and wisdom. Let's start with something I quickly realized. When you live alone, you have to be your own safety net. 1. Being your own safety net. When I first started living alone, I didn't think much about personal safety. Then one day, I slipped in the kitchen while reaching for something on the top shelf. It wasn't a serious fall, but I remember lying there for a moment, realizing that if it had been worse, no one would have known. That moment changed how I thought about living independently. As we age, the reality is that we don't always have someone around to notice if something goes wrong. I've read stories of older adults who've fallen and weren't found for hours or even days because they didn't have anyone checking in on them. It's not just about falls either. Simple things, like forgetting to lock the door or not hearing the smoke alarm in time, can become risks when you're on your own. After my fall, I made a few changes that gave me peace of mind. I started carrying my phone with me everywhere, even to the bathroom. It sounds excessive, but it's better to be safe than sorry. I also invested in a smartwatch with a fall detection feature. One friend of mine installed a medical alert system that connects directly to emergency services. Another great idea I came across was setting up a security camera at the front door. It helps him feel more secure and allows his family to check in remotely. If you live in a remote area like I do, it's worth considering a neighbor or close friend who can pop in regularly or at least check on you by phone. These little precautions might feel unnecessary at first, but they can make all the difference. Living alone doesn't mean living without support, it just means planning ahead. Speaking of planning, let's talk about another important topic: coping with loneliness. 2. Dealing with loneliness. After setting up safety measures, I thought I had everything under control, but it didn't take long for another challenge to creep in: loneliness. As an introvert, I've always valued my own space, so I assumed living alone would suit me perfectly. And for a while, it did. I enjoyed the quiet mornings, the ability to set my own schedule, and the freedom to spend time exactly how I wanted. But then, there were moments when the silence felt deafening. I remember one weekend in particular. It had been 3 days since I'd spoken to anyone, and for the first time, the quiet didn't feel peaceful. It felt isolating. I missed having someone to share even the simplest conversations with, like how the weather was or what I planned to eat for dinner. It made me realize that no matter how independent we are, humans need connection. To combat this, I made some changes. I joined a local community center that offers weekly meetups for older adults. It was nerve-wracking at first, but now I look forward to seeing familiar faces. I also got a small dog, Charlie, who not only keeps me company, but also gets me out of the house for walks. Additionally, I set a goal to call or video chat with family or friends at least once a week. Those small connections have made a big difference. Speaking of changes, another surprising challenge of living alone is keeping up with your home. Let's talk about that next. 3. The comfort of daily routines. After finding ways to stay connected, I realized something else that helped me thrive while living alone: my daily routines. It may sound simple, but those small, everyday habits have brought me more comfort and joy than I ever expected. When you're on your own, it's easy to lose track of time. Without someone else's schedule influencing your day, hours can blur together, leaving you feeling unmoored. I've found that having a set routine brings stability and a sense of purpose. Every morning, I start my day with a cup of coffee on the porch. Rain or shine, I sit there and enjoy the quiet, watching the world wake up. It's a small ritual, but it sets the tone for my day. Afternoon walks have become another cherished part of my routine. Not only do they keep me physically active, but they also give me time to clear my mind. Sometimes I'll walk to the local park and chat with a neighbor or simply admire the changing seasons. I've also learned to build flexibility into my schedule. Some days I'll swap my walk for a longer gardening session or treat myself to a quiet afternoon, reading a favorite book. It's about creating habits that ground me while still leaving room for spontaneity. Daily routines give me structure, but they also remind me to enjoy life's simple pleasures. Speaking of maintaining balance, let's talk about the challenge of keeping up with home maintenance. 4. Staying physically active. Maintaining my home routines helped me feel more grounded, but I noticed another aspect of living alone that required extra attention: staying physically active. When I lived with my wife, we naturally encouraged each other to stay on the move, whether it was taking a walk after dinner or tackling household chores together. Now, without that built-in motivation, it's all too easy to slip into a sedentary lifestyle. I'll admit, there were times when I spent whole afternoons on the couch, telling myself I'd go for a walk later, only to realize the entire day had passed. I began to notice stiffness in my joints and a general lack of energy. It wasn't just my body that suffered, being inactive also dampened my mood. That's when I realized I needed to take charge of my physical well-being. I started small, committing to daily walks around the neighborhood. On mornings when I felt less motivated, my dog Charlie became my secret weapon. He wouldn't let me skip his walk, and before I knew it, walking became a daily ritual for both of us. To add variety, I joined a gentle yoga class at the local community center. At first, I wasn't sure if it was for me, but the stretches have done wonders for my flexibility, and the group setting gives me a chance to connect with others. Even simple activities like gardening or taking the stairs instead of the elevator make a difference. The key is to keep moving, no matter how small the effort may seem. Physical activity isn't just about staying fit, it's about maintaining independence and feeling alive. Speaking of independence, another challenge I faced was cooking for one. Let me share how I turned that into a rewarding experience. 5. Cooking for one. After finding ways to stay active, I turned my attention to another aspect of living alone: cooking. When my wife was still with me, we used to enjoy preparing meals together. She'd handle the main dish, and I'd be in charge of side dishes or setting the table. But once I started living alone, cooking felt more like a chore than a pleasure. I found myself relying too often on frozen dinners or skipping meals altogether. One evening, after reheating the same microwave meal for the third night in a row, I realized I deserved better. Cooking isn't just about eating, it's an act of self-care. Preparing a proper meal became a way for me to remind myself that I'm worth the effort. I started by experimenting with simple, healthy recipes. I learned to batch cook on weekends, making a big pot of soup or chili that I could portion out for several meals during the week. This made it easier to have something nutritious on hand without the daily effort. I also found inspiration in a cookbook designed for cooking for one. The recipes were easy to follow and didn't leave me with too many leftovers. Over time, I began to enjoy the process, chopping vegetables, seasoning to my taste, and even plating my meals nicely. Cooking for myself became more than just feeding my body. It was a way to feel connected to my past and take pride in my independence. Speaking of independence, maintaining a home on your own is another challenge worth addressing. Let's talk about that next. 6. Maintaining the home. After getting back into the rhythm of cooking for myself, I realized that maintaining my home was another area where living alone brought unexpected challenges. When I was younger, mowing the lawn, cleaning the gutters, or fixing a leaky faucet didn't seem like a big deal. But as I've gotten older, those same tasks have become harder to manage. I remember one summer afternoon when I decided to clean out the garage. What I thought would be a quick job turned into an all-day ordeal, leaving me sore and exhausted for days. It was a wake-up call that I couldn't keep doing everything on my own. These days, I've learned to be smarter about home maintenance. For heavier tasks, like repairing the roof or deep cleaning the house, I've started hiring professionals. It's an investment in both my safety and peace of mind. For smaller chores, I found that asking for help from family or friends isn't as hard as I once thought. My neighbor, for instance, offered to help me trim the hedges in exchange for some advice on his garden. Living alone doesn't mean you have to tackle everything by yourself. Accepting help or delegating tasks makes home maintenance far less daunting. Speaking of balance, let's explore the unique experience of finding peace in the quiet of living alone. 7. Embracing the quiet. After finding ways to manage my home, I was reminded of one of the most striking aspects of living alone: the quiet. At first, it was both comforting and strange. I could finally enjoy a peaceful cup of coffee without interruptions. But there were also evenings when the silence felt heavy, almost too loud in its stillness. Living alone has taught me that silence can be both a friend and a foe. On good days, it offers a chance to reflect, recharge, and appreciate the slower pace of life. I've come to cherish moments like sitting on my porch at sunset, letting the sounds of nature fill the air. But on harder days, especially when I go long stretches without speaking to anyone, the quiet can feel isolating. To strike a balance, I've found small ways to break the silence. I started listening to podcasts while doing chores. It's like having a friendly voice in the background. Music has also become a daily companion, whether it's a soothing classical playlist in the morning or upbeat tunes while I cook dinner. I've also made it a habit to call my kids or an old friend a few times a week just to stay connected. The quiet of living alone doesn't have to be overwhelming. With the right adjustments, it can become a gift that brings clarity and peace. Next, let's explore how we can maintain a sense of time and rhythm in our days. 8. Managing time. After learning to embrace the quiet, I noticed another unique challenge of living alone: managing my time. Without the natural rhythm of a partner's schedule or the demands of a busy household, the days sometimes felt endless. I remember looking at the clock one afternoon and being shocked that it was only 2 p.m. It felt like the day had been dragging on forever. The lack of structure can leave your day feeling aimless. Without tasks or responsibilities to anchor your time, it's easy to fall into a routine of sitting around, letting the hours slip by unnoticed. I realized that I needed to create my own sense of rhythm to bring meaning to my days. Now, I stick to a loose but reliable schedule. I start the day with my morning coffee on the porch and make a point to tackle one specific task before lunch. It could be something as simple as grocery shopping, sorting through old photos, or taking Charlie, my dog, for a long walk. Afternoons are for hobbies. I've taken up painting again, something I hadn't done in decades. Knowing that I have these small goals keeps me motivated and engaged. Having a structure doesn't just help pass the time, it brings purpose to each day. Speaking of creating structure, let's talk about how decluttering can bring clarity to your living space and mind. 9. Decluttering and Organizing. As I worked to bring more structure to my days, I realized my living space also needed some attention. Over the years, I'd accumulated so many things, old photo albums, furniture, knickknacks from vacations, that my home started to feel more like a storage unit than a place of comfort. The hardest part wasn't the physical task of decluttering, but the emotional attachment to so many of these items. I remember standing in my garage, holding an old lamp that hadn't worked in years. It belonged to my parents, and even though I had no use for it, letting it go felt like losing a piece of them. That's the challenge of decluttering when you've lived a long life. Every object seems to hold a memory. To make it easier, I started using a simple rule. If it doesn't bring me joy or serve a purpose, it's time to let it go. Some items, like my old typewriter, I donated to a local charity, knowing it might bring someone else happiness. For other things, like my late wife's sewing kit, I gave them to family members who would cherish them. Now my home feels lighter and more welcoming. The process wasn't easy, but it taught me to focus on the present rather than hold on to every piece of the past. Speaking of staying connected to the present, let's talk about creating a fulfilling social life when living alone. 10. Creating a social life. After decluttering my home and making it feel more inviting, I began to notice another challenge of living alone: maintaining an active social life. When my wife was still alive, we were always attending family gatherings, church events, or dinners with friends. But as the years went by, those invitations started to dwindle. It wasn't that people didn't care. Life simply got busy for everyone. Family members had their own commitments, and friends moved away or faced their own health challenges. At first, I waited for the phone to ring or for someone to invite me somewhere. But eventually, I realized that if I wanted to stay socially connected, I had to take the initiative. Instead of waiting, I began hosting small get-togethers at my house. I'd invite a few friends over for coffee and conversation, or organize a game night with some neighbors. I even started a Sunday afternoon walking group where we explored different trails in the area. One of the most rewarding decisions I made was joining a book club at the local library. It not only gave me something to look forward to each month, but also introduced me to new people who share my love of reading. Taking charge of my social life helped me feel less isolated and gave me a renewed sense of purpose. Living alone doesn't mean being lonely. It's an opportunity to build connections on your own terms. Speaking of taking care of yourself, let's explore the importance of self-care and how it can transform your daily life. 11th, prioritizing self-care. After finding ways to stay socially connected, I realized something important. Taking care of myself was just as crucial as maintaining my social life. When you live alone, it's easy to let self-care slide. No one notices if you skip a shower, stay in the same clothes for days, or eat a bowl of cereal for dinner. But I've learned that neglecting yourself can slowly chip away at both your physical health and your sense of self-worth. There was a time when I fell into that trap. I'd tell myself, who's going to notice if I don't shave today? Or why bother cooking a proper meal just for me? But over time, I began to feel the toll it took, both physically and emotionally. That's when I decided to make self-care a priority again. Now I start each morning by getting dressed, even if I'm not going anywhere. It sets the tone for my day and makes me feel more put together. I've also carved out time for activities that nurture my mind and soul. A short walk in the park helps clear my thoughts, while lighting a candle and reading a good book in the evening feels like a small indulgence. Living alone is a chance to focus on yourself in a way you might not have before. It's not about luxury, but about reminding yourself that you're worth the effort. And speaking of making the most of life, let's bring everything together as we wrap up this journey. Living alone as an older adult is a journey filled with both challenges and rewards. It offers a unique sense of freedom and independence, but it also requires thoughtful preparation and self-awareness. From staying physically active and connected to others, to creating meaningful routines and taking care of yourself, every step helps build a life that's both fulfilling and secure. I hope the tips and insights shared in this video inspire you to embrace this chapter with confidence. Share your own experiences or advice in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more wisdom tailored just for you.